Hope you can all still see well. It's a very gloomy day here, it's getting quite dark. Right, I'm going to apply a little bit of molybdenum paste here onto that detent for the detent spring for the blade actuating ring. And on the posts on the blade actuating ring that are picked up by the main drive cam. I'll just give that a little wipe. And I can instantly tell that it's a smoother action. The opening and closing is a smoother action with this detent spring running against that post. So that's good. Springs. Yeah, getting the springs in place is always entertaining. The first one I need to get in place is this one on this lever, and I'll swing it around where you can hardly see anything because I need to so I can see it. I'm going to hold a toothpick over the middle so that spring cannot get away. Pick up the end of the spring with my tweezers and lift it over the top and behind the post on this lever. That's the idea. There it is. So now this lever is sprung loaded and this lever is sprung loaded. The B lever, that can go on there. So I'll hold back that tab and swing the blades into the blade open position, and the B lever, I'll just give that a wipe with some naphtha just to remove any contaminants there, not that there's usually a problem with that, and drop that lever in position here. With the blades open, it means that the B lever can swing right to the centre, to the towards the lens tube. If you had it the other way, it would not. And this retaining screw with its spring needs to go on, and this is awkward because it's got to be put in position and then rotated. The spring rotated into position. Put that on there. Check that that lever moves. Yeah, it does, so I can tighten that screw down. I've got to swing the tail of this spring here right round over the other side and hook it into this lever here, so it's a bit awkward to, it's awkward to do, it's even more awkward to show you what I'm doing. So we're going to lift the tail of this spring around, and it's caught on something. Oh yeah, the bottom of it's shaped like a hook, so it's caught in there. Let's swing that right round against the lens tube, and the tail of it needs to hook onto the B lever like that. Yeah, so the B lever is now sprung loaded, pulling it towards the lens tube. That's good. So if I hold back the B lever with my finger, I can pull back the blade actuating ring. Everything drops back into position. That all looks good. Let's puff a bit of dust off there. Next, I think I can put the lever on the back for the self timer and flash sync. It's retaining plate and it's 3 screws. So I'll clean these components quickly with a bit of naphtha. If there's a problem here, usually it would be oil contamination. I wouldn't expect to find an awful lot with a camera like this because there is no lens helical behind the shutter. all the lens focusing action happens on the lens at the front of the shutter. So, some more molybdenum paste. This little tab here has tiny serrations, that a little bit like a ratchet teeth on there, so I'll give that a gentle wipe with some molybdenum paste. Molybdenum paste, you only need a smear of it, a tiny smear, just like leaving a dirty mark on there really, and some on the detent spring for that post. And then this lever should go into place. I've just got to make sure that the pin goes behind that spring so that the spring is on the correct side of it. That's good. And then its retaining plate can go on. And the retaining plate has a countersink hole on one side because that's the screw that went near the flash sink there. And there were two round head screws here and let's get that one in. That one. Just run those screws down lightly. There's the third. This is the countersunk head screw. I want another screwdriver for that one, that's just a little bit big for that job. Where has it gone? It's been falling off the bench. This one will do. Do that screw up. Do its two mates up. So that's our control lever for the flash sync speed all in place, for the self timer. More cleaning to be done. These components are for the flash sync. That's the sector gear for the pallet wheel. The pallet wheel itself, now the pallet wheel itself was a bit reluctant to spin freely, and I suspect it just had a bit of dried oil or something on the inside of the shaft, so I'll just give that a wee birthday with a bit of naphtha. And see how that goes. Let's get this in position. I'll drop the pallet wheel in there. That certainly moves freely. And the sector gear here, there's a little tab on the end of this where it goes behind a catch and is held in position when it's under tension. So I've just put a bit of smear of molybdenum paste on there so that that catch will engage and release smoothly with minimum friction. Yeah, it fits in there, and its retaining spring, or its activating spring, needs to hook over post here to the hole in that arm. So I've got this held in a pair of pliers. There we go. That went smoothly enough. So in the cocked position, that pulls out, that little arm drops behind it to hold it in the cocked position, as the blade actuating ring starts to move, as soon as it starts to move, it releases the action here, which runs that pallet down, which would enable the flash sync and so forth. That's all moving smoothly. And the next part I want to do is put in the flash contacts and related stuff, so they need to be cleaned. This lever in particular is a catch that holds the shutter in the cocked position, and it needs to be quite free from oil, because otherwise with the broad flat surface here and here, that may stick these together so that it doesn't release, it doesn't swing properly, and then if that's the case, what happens is that you find that the shutter, you'll go to cock the shutter but it won't remain cocked, because this is being held in the unlatched position because the surfaces are stuck together. So I'm just cleaning these components to make sure there's no great gobs of grease or dust or anything on them. They all look quite clean actually, they're not a problem at all. And starting with this lever, I'll get this into place. So normally I just run the molybdenum paste through the centre there. And this goes over a post. It's got a wee tail of a spring on here which goes against the case. It's a bit awkward to get in position. But there it is. So it's caught underneath that catch there, it's below that catch. The spring here is against the case on the inside. It's not sticking up in the air, it's not pointing down, it's right against the case. That's good. If you get that in the wrong position, that tail of the spring is in the wrong position, it can actually stop the blade actuating ring moving freely. Our flash contact goes on over the top here, and there's like a brass collar that it fits on over the top. Now this blade, this flash contact looks a bit bent there, so it may or may not be correct. I've got to check that. It's certainly not what I would expect to see. If I move this into the cocked position, it will swing everything away so I can get this control lever in position easily. And there's a small screw goes on the end here. And at the other end there's a return spring which is quite fine. It goes right here, and the screw that holds that in place is a shouldered screw, so it's got a shoulder around the screw that the spring can rotate around. It's important that the spring is free to move around that screw, that it's not trapped underneath the screw, otherwise it won't work correctly. This is doing its best to wriggle out of place. That seems good. I'm just checking that that spring is free. Yes, I can tell it is. So those two screws I can do up. And the spring needs to be pulled over and hooked into a notch at the back of the arm here. That's it. So this arm is now sprung loaded. That spring's not sitting where I want it to. Why is that? Let's check that. No, that seems fine. That's good. Okay, so far so good. The shutter release lever, I'll just wipe that with some naphtha again, and to clean it, just checking it to make sure there's no problem with it. Sometimes levers get bent when people have done awful things to them. And I'll wipe some molybdenum paste on the post. And you know, I'm sure you can't even see that. It's just leaving a dirty mark with the molybdenum paste. You need very, very little of it to do quite a lot in terms of reducing friction. And then this lever can go into place here. The tab at the bottom here has to be underneath the B lever because it lifts the B lever out of place. And the spring at the top needs to be tucked down into the case. And of course everything has to happen at the same time. So there's the shutter release lever is pressed. You can see how it lifts the arm here. And as it lifts the arm, it pulls this away from where the main drive cam would be there and releases the main drive cam. So that looks good. And as it comes back up, it lifts the B lever. So we swing this into the blade's open position. You see the B lever can drop into position, and as you release the shutter release, the B lever is lifted back up so that the blades could continue their travel and close again. Main drive cam and its main drive spring, I'll give them a quick clean. Often the cam in particular is fairly generously lubricated with graphite grease. In the way of all of these things, usually where the graphite grease is generously coating the lever, it's not doing anything useful because it's not on surfaces that actually contact anything. That's quite normal. People feel a lot happier about applying lubricant and they'll shove it anywhere and everywhere. Because it has to be on surfaces that are contacting, otherwise it's doing nothing except acting as a dust trap. Let's come back here, lever. Now I'm just rubbing some molybdenum paste on the main drive cam. I've ran the toothpick through the centre, and on the curved edge, that curved surface there, that's where it runs against the lever on the retard gear train. And on this, let's get it here, these 2 points here and here are where it picks up the blade actuating ring. So I'll pop this into place on the post, and I've got its spring here, and its spring, as I say, is tired. It's not too tired to do its job probably, and I'm not sure that I will have a better example in my spares. These springs were replaced as a matter of course when these shutters were comparatively current, but that's all a long, long time ago. Now you just can't get them at all. And on these particular shutters, a very poor strength of spring in that point has the bizarre effect of causing problems with the 15th of a second speed, even though all the other speeds might be right on the money. I'll just cock this and just check the shutter fires. It does. That would have locked open on the B setting there had there been anything to slow the shutter down at all, because there's nothing to prevent the B lever from dropping in there. But it didn't, because the action was free. There was nothing slowing the action down so it didn't have time. I can give you a demonstration of that. We'll cock it, cock the main drive cam. Now if I release the shutter, but I'll hold back the main drive cam so it only runs slowly, you'll see that it has a chance the B lever dropped in because it had time to do so, and now the shutter's held open. And as I release my finger on the shutter release, the B lever lifts off and the shutter continues its action and closes. So when the shutter's absolutely clean and there's nothing holding it back, like the retard gear train, even when this is back in its doing nothing phase, the shutter goes so quickly the B lever doesn't have a chance to drop in. Right, my retard gear train and the self timer, they need to be cleaned, and I'm going to do that in this case by cleaning them in an ultrasonic cleaner in a little jar of naphtha, and I'll just get 10 minutes and that'll shake out any oils, grease and dust and so forth, and then I'll blow out the naphtha afterwards and that'll carry away with it all the contaminants. These will be clean. Back once I'm ready to do that. Right, with the two gear trains back in the ultrasonic cleaner, I'm now just blowing out all the naphtha, and of course with it any suspended particles or oils or similar things, and it'll leave these two completely clean, or as clean as they're likely to be. We'll just check the action of this self timer. I'll just cock it, hold back the tab. That's running down nice and smoothly. That sounds good. And the retard gear train here, we'll just check the action of that. And that's returning to the rest position smoothly as well. So I'm very pleased with the state of those two speed trains, and I'm going to lubricate those with a bit of graphite powder. First I want to make sure that they're completely dry so that the powder doesn't clump up and cause problems. And I'll start in this case with the delay action or self timer, and I'll just pick up some graphite powder, hold back the tab on this so that it operates. Now the powder's just clogging this at the moment, but it's running down. And basically here, mostly the graphite powder will lubricate. It'll be being rubbed in between the surfaces of the gear teeth so that they'll roll over each other smoothly. And I'll just blow out any excess powder, cock this again and check that it runs smoothly. And that sounds very good. I don't have any problem with the state of that. Now likewise the retard gear train, I'll just drop a bit of powder onto that, hold back the tab at the end here which holds back the pallets, and then move the operating lever repeatedly and work those gears, all the little gears together, little pinions and gears with the graphite powder on them. And that'll just lubricate the surfaces of those gears, just the contact points of the teeth. They're only very small, these components. It doesn't take much. It only just takes a spot of corrosion or something on a gear tooth, and it won't want to move. It won't want to roll over the next tooth. That's working nicely. And they can go into the shutter now. Let's blow out any excess powder. And where is the shutter body? There it is. So I'll cock the shutter. put the retard gear train into position, pulled back this lever here because the arm there catches behind a tab on the blade actuating ring. The screw at this end acts as a pivot for that retard gear train because it can be swung towards the centre or towards the outside of the case for greater or lesser engagement of the retard gear train with the cam here in order to set the speeds. And the screw that runs through here, the screw hole is oversized so that it allows for adjustment. Right, let's see if this will fire. It should give us about 1 second. Yeah, that seemed alright. If anything, it felt slightly quick. Let's try it again. Yeah, I would say that was probably running a little bit fast. I'll move the retard gear train in for greater engagement and slower shutter. That's probably too much. We'll see how we go. Try that. That seems okay. We'll leave that for there for the moment. I can come back and adjust that. But the self timer can go in now. Get that into position. Yeah, it's sometimes tricky to get this seated in the case. That's better. There's a little screw head on the base that has to fall into a hole in the mechanism plate. It's sitting there now. If I hold back that tab, the self timer will run down. That's good. Well, the shutter's just about just about done now. So these last components here, I'm going to clean these up. And then I can check my shutter speeds after that. So I'll just give these a quick wipe with some naphtha. The speed cam setting ring has got a few marks on it. It's not important. The inside is typically more heavily greased up. In this case it's not a bad example at all. Some repairers are in the habit of, they love their graphite grease, they butter things with graphite grease. But unless the grease is between contacting working surfaces, it does nothing useful and could potentially cause problems. This cocking ring, I'm just wiping this inside and out. And here's the shaft, the cocking shaft. It runs through the shutter. For dealing with teeth on a little pinion like that, you can use a very stiff paintbrush. This is a somewhat mutilated and very old paintbrush. You can see how short it is. But that's very good for brushing out between those teeth. Brushing away any oil or rubbish like that, grease and so forth, and it allows you to see if there is a problem with the gear at all, and there doesn't appear to be. So the pinion, I'll just give this shaft a wipe with some molybdenum paste. The pinion has a small tab on it here which goes behind the main cam here, drops in like that. You can see the position of that. I'm just going to pop this shutter into a holder here. This holder in fact is from a Retina Reflex S camera. It's one of the front sections. I'll see if I can get that to drop in. Yeah, it just makes a handy holder for that style of shutter. So white around the inside with molybdenum paste, around the outside, across the front teeth of those gears. And this little tab back here is where the thing latches in position. And this, the end of the spring hooks over a post right here, and I've got to get this in position and the timing correct. The last tooth of the cam here should be in the last valley of the curved rack there. That's good, that's holding back that okay. And the shutter speed setting ring, cam ring, I normally run some molybdenum paste over the cam surface here, round the centre, round the surfaces here and here, and that's it. This only goes on in one place. This section around here is where it works against the, or sets the speed of the blade actuating ring. And making sure the B lever is not trapped underneath it at this point. I'll put the retainer in place. And that's my shutter complete. So I can cock that and check the speeds.